Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. My name is Andy, as always, and thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to new listeners. Hope that you stick around and get something out of this episode, although it is a bit of a different one, as I've been known for in the past. If you do want to get a better taste of what the podcast is about, you can go and listen to some of the previous ones where I've done with guests. This one in particular today will be a solo one. So stick around, of course, but if you do want to get a better understanding of what it's all about, then by all means, there's plenty of great episodes that I've done to date so far, in my opinion, of course. Now, I think for anybody who's a regular listener or has been listening on and off or watched from afar or whatnot, you would have seen a bit of a drop in the number of episodes as of late. In May, I certainly went hard, and I think for most weeks I had at least two being released each week. And in June, it started to slow down, and now into July, it's slowed right down to put it lightly. But main reason for that is not a lack of guests. If anything, I'm absolutely inundated with people that are happy to have a chat and things that I've got to organise and whatnot. So I've certainly got a lot of people there that I need to really pull my finger out and organise something with. But I guess the big thing at the moment is just, well, it's life. as general and vague as that sounds, life has just certainly had me busy and mind elsewhere over the last few months, and will probably be the same for the next few months coming up as well. I'm getting married in a couple of months at the end of August. So that's a mixture of emotions, mostly excitement, but a hell of a lot of stress involved. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have been married and have probably got great stories and not so great stories. I can't complain overall. It's I think in hindsight, looking back so far to date, it has been pretty easy and pretty straightforward. But I think just for me, it's been more so being pushed out of my comfort zone and a lot of reflection and seeing my life change. And I guess from that point of view, it's been hard because I've seen a lot of worlds collide and adapt, and I've had to really change my perspective on life in a lot of different ways. So it's been mentally exhausting more so than anything else. So leading up to the wedding in a couple of months, I've got a lot of things that still need to be done, a lot of bills that still need to get paid, the usual fun. So that's first and foremost in my mind, and has certainly distracted me from doing this. But on top of that, we're also heading to the US, Lord concerned, and we'll be playing Prog Power in September. We're trying to see whether we can do anything else while we're over there, but just given the process with the visas and the guys at Prog Power organising everything for us, the chances aren't terribly high, but we are still having an open mind to see if there are any options to play somewhere else on the way to Atlanta in September. So we'll see what happens, but worst case scenario, we'll be in Atlanta itself for our show, and we'll be hanging out with a lot of awesome people there that I met last year as well. In addition to that, I have a ridiculously long honeymoon that's being planned with my fiancée Jess. We're going to Europe in September, October, and we've got a short stint down in Melbourne as well. So I'm juggling all these different worlds, and also a job that I'll soon be leaving at the end of August as well for a variety of reasons. So I think everything's just sort of come to one dramatic crashing impact point, and I've had to try and juggle everything. So it's been pretty challenging, but I'm looking forward to getting out of the country and putting my feet up in some places anyway, and doing a bit of reflection and enjoying all the things that have happened so far this year. And at the tail end of the year, I think I'll be pretty satisfied with what's happened and what I've been able to achieve as well. So a lot of stuff happening, and just to give a bit of context as to what's happening with the podcast as well. So what I will be doing is I'm in the process of upgrading a lot of my equipment to make it a little bit more versatile when I'm out on the road. So I'm keeping in mind that I'll be in the US and I'll also be in Europe. So I'm hoping to take some of my gear with me to hopefully do a few episodes, whether it be just me solo or find a few people along the way to have a bit of chat with over a few drinks and whatnot. So I dare say that there'll still be plenty of stuff happening. It's just a case of doing a bit of prep work in advance and working out how best to streamline it and make it easier so that I can continue to put up episodes while I'm gallivanting all over the planet. Now, also moving forward, as I mentioned in the last episode, I've signed up to the affiliate program for Amazon. Now, you guys would have seen, if you're paying attention and you've been listening and watching in the past, I've been lightly spamming Facebook and other avenues with some Amazon links and trying to encourage you guys to buy stuff. I guess the big thing with this is that I'm setting it up in a way that hopefully it can generate enough income that can cover the monthly costs of running a podcast. It's not really to make big bucks so I can sit back with my feet up. It's more of a case that I'd love to just make this something that's self-funded and will also open up more opportunities to be able to take the podcast into other areas, do additional things that cost money that will hopefully make the podcast bigger and better. So I'm looking at little ways and hopefully sneaky and, well, not so much sneaky, but some smart ways of hopefully generating a bit of income along the way. So for anyone who hasn't listened before and wants to know what this affiliate program is about, if you go to andysocial.net, in the links across the top of the page, you'll see, I think I've called it something like the Andy Amazon portal or something like that. If you click on that, it takes you to Amazon. Now, what you'll see is just your stock standard Amazon page and you shop as normal. There's nothing different. You guys won't see any signage, any words or anything like that to show that anything's linked to me. It's exactly the same as what you would normally do if you shop on Amazon. So there's nothing in particular that you guys get out of it apart from a warm and fuzzy feeling that you're helping me. But what happens is that by using that particular link, it is linked to an affiliate account of mine. And then when you guys shop, and depending on the items that you purchase, I'll get a small advertising commission fee based off whatever's purchased. So I've had a few friends of mine kindly go out and buy a few things off Amazon for me, and I can see that it works. So it's fantastic. So it's actually quite exciting. Whether it generates enough for the podcast is another thing, but we'll play it by ear. There's a lot of people that are interested to help, and I think the biggest thing that I could ask of you guys, if you do regularly shop on Amazon, either bookmark my website, so that's andysocial.net, or copy the link from my website and then use that as your bookmarked link. That way you don't have to worry about clicking through a million different things. You can just click on that Amazon link as you normally would. It's just that you'll have a slightly different URL with my user ID in there. You'll also see on various pages of the website there, especially when I have guests, I've tried to go back and clean up a lot of this, where if I've had a musician or an author or something like that, I've tried to find their products on Amazon and put those links into the show notes as well. So if you do listen to any of the previous episodes, or there is an episode that you remember that you've still been meaning to grab a book or a CD or whatever it is by that person, go back and have a look and see if you can find the link in the show notes, because I've tried to put them in everywhere that I can remember, that is. And that should make it a lot easier. Otherwise, just use the main link at the top of my website. I'm also posting random links through Facebook and Twitter as well. So if there is something that tickles your fancy, it might be a book or whatnot, or a CD, whatever it might be, doesn't matter. Just if it interests you, click on it and just shop as per normal, and hopefully I'll grab a couple of cents out of it. So hopefully that will start to kickstart a few different things for me for the podcast. I'm looking at a few other little ways to generate some income, but it's all baby steps, and it's all a new world for me. So we'll see how this one goes, and I'll slowly add to it as we move forward. Now, one other thing I've decided to do, just for anyone who's interested in, I guess, the day-to-days of running this podcast, is that I'm condensing the platforms a little bit. So what I've decided to do is cancel my account with Omni. I've been plugging Omni a little bit, but I think for anyone who's been regularly listening, I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. I don't think that Omni's a bad platform, so to speak. It's just that I think you're going to get the most benefit from using that as an actual podcast host, rather than a place that is streaming from an existing host, if that makes sense to anybody who's listening. So I've been paying a monthly fee for them to more or less stream my podcast episodes from another host. And I've been looking back at the stats from it, and I'm just not getting enough traffic from there to really warrant spending that money per month at this stage. So I've cancelled my account. There is a free version of it. I don't know what sort of restricted access that actually has, whether it'll still exist there or not. So if there are people that have been listening on Omni, or several people, apologies in advance, and hopefully you guys will still be listening via another platform down the track. What I will keep up still is Stitcher, because Stitcher's just automatic. It just automatically updates. I don't get a lot of traffic from there, but I don't pay for it. So to me, it doesn't make much of a difference. I don't have to worry about that. Obviously iTunes is the main one. It's the main attention grabber. It gets most of the listeners in. It's the platform that I use when I listen to other podcasts. So it's that's definitely the most important one. I think anybody who runs their own podcast will know that's absolutely crucial to have. In addition to that, I do have YouTube, which I've been plugging quite a bit. And apart from that, I'm not really looking at anything else. I know a few other people use SoundCloud, but to me, it just doesn't seem like it's worth the time. And I think to really sort of maximize that, I think you have to pay for it as well. So I'm not going to bother with that for the time being. If traffic builds up and I might have a better budget to work with down the track, then I might look to push it out to a few different other platforms. But at the moment, I think I'll just try and condense it and make it a little bit more streamlined. And I think that will probably benefit the podcast long term by doing that. Apart from that, that's about it. I will not carry on about rate and review and all that rubbish, because I do that in all the other podcasts. But I've just said it then, so there you go. And obviously YouTube as well. If you're just trying to get people into the show itself, so this one, or whatever it might be, YouTube's the best way to introduce people to it to begin with. It's just an easy way to pass the link on and get people listening. I know a lot of people listen to the episodes at work via YouTube. It's a lot easier just to have that playing in the background. So if there are people out there who are listening now, thank you so much. A really cool thing you can do if you have a spare couple of minutes is just leave some comments on the videos as well. It's pretty sparse there at the moment, so any comments would be great. Just shows a bit of activity on the page. I'm sure that somewhere deeply hidden in the analytics of YouTube and Google and whatnot, it will be of some benefit to the channel itself. So anything that you guys can do, whether it be a little bit of a like or a share or a thumbs up or a quick comment, those things can do wonders for the podcast. So regardless of any shopping or affiliated work that you guys can do to help me out, just those little things are fantastic. But I guess, drawing it right back to square one, the fact that you guys are listening is great as well. And the fact that you guys are actually listening to me still right now is probably pretty amazing. So thank you. All right, moving along. For this podcast, I'm going to keep it fairly short and sweet. Hopefully, in my world, that probably means that I'm going to babble on for way too long. But this is going to be the top 10 podcasts that I listen to at the moment. The reason why I decided to do this is that I was looking through my app today and noticed that there's quite a few that I do listen to. And I tried to pick out 10 main ones that I listen to for various different reasons. Not because they're necessarily the best ones, but I wanted to give a bit of an idea for people of what type of podcasts are out there, what the possibilities are. I know there are people that probably are listening to this via my actual website, or using a feed link, RSS, or on YouTube, and aren't actually actively listening to other podcasts out there. So this is for you guys, and I guess for anybody else out there who might want to try and convince somebody that podcasts are willing, I'm not willing, but actually a worthwhile thing to immerse yourself in, then this is probably not the episode for them to listen to. But I hope that what I can give is a few different perspectives on what the platform's about, and some of the possibilities and uses that it can be used for, because I think even for me, I'm still discovering the possibilities of what I can do with my podcast based on what others are doing as well. So we'll kick right into it. I've got a few special mentions at the end as well, because I just couldn't restrict it to 10, and there's a few people that I really wanted to just plug and make a mention of. But as I said, this is not necessarily the best ones out there, but I think I definitely encourage you guys to at least give each of these shows a bit of a shot. Just listen to a little bit of an episode or a full episode, whatever you want, just to understand and listen to what they do, how they structure their podcasts. And look, if there's people out there who really are keen to do their own podcast, I can't encourage it enough. By all means, dive into it. It's one of the best things that I've done, and I've only been doing it for under a year, and it's just been eye-opening. It's been just I can't even put into words. I've grown so much as a person just from the conversations that I've had with people, and now sitting on what would probably be my 52nd episode now, I've only just scraped the surface with the possibilities and where this thing's going to go in the future. So it's been really cool, and I think just for people, if you really want to get a bit more of an awareness of the people around you and interact with people on a different way, this is certainly a really cool way of reaching out to people and connecting and building an audience and a community. So keep that in mind when I go through these 10 as well, because I hope that this will motivate some of you to dive into it and set up your own shows, and maybe we can create our own little network of podcast shows and appear on each other's. So in no order as well, I've just pretty much gone from the top of my list to the bottom. The first one that I need to make a mention of is the Vertical Podcast by JJ Redick. Now, if you're not into sports, this will probably not interest you, but JJ Redick is a basketball player that plays for the Los Angeles Clippers. NBA, of course, for people that don't know. Now, this podcast is interesting because JJ's it's a very polished podcast in the sense that JJ's agent or whoever he's affiliated with and working with has certainly done a lot of the legwork for him. He's got a lot of advertisements in there. It's a very slick intro. It's very cheesy at times and very forced with the way that he tries to introduce his ads. I would even borderline say that it's cringeworthy, and JJ is certainly an interesting guy where he appears to try really hard to I don't know, I'm trying to think of the way to describe it, but he tries really hard to sort of open up and have candid conversations, and I think he seems like a nice guy, but I think at the same time he is a guy that makes a hell of a lot of money, and I don't know, it's an interesting thing to listen to. But the reason why I love it is that I'm a big basketball fan, and JJ gets a lot of really cool guests on other players and people that aren't related to basketball as well, and gets an understanding of what what it's like to be in the NBA, what it's like to be earning so much money, and the problems that can occur with earning so much money, and the ways that what NBA life's like, the long road schedule, all the games that are played each season, workouts, routines, and everything to stay on top and maintain professionalism in such a dynamic and highly distracting environment. So those aspects of it are really, really cool, and I do think that JJ's podcast is going to get really, really good as time goes on, because he's still fairly new to it. I think he's only just been doing it since January or February this year, and I've only just started listening to it probably in the last month or so. So I do think that as he finds his groove, it's going to get a lot better. It won't be as forced and awkward, and I think that he's going to be able to provide a lot more to the podcast. But I think the big thing with this is that you can hear what it's like, and that sports personalities are starting to pick it up as well. So, everybody can have a voice, and probably for people that normally you only see at a press conference saying the same thing over and over again, this is a great example of really sort of hearing somebody talk candidly and behind the scenes, so to speak, of what life's like being a professional sportsman, especially in the United States, where it's just it's another level altogether. So really encourage you guys to even just to give one of those episodes a shot, just to understand what it sounds like and what it feels like to listen to an episode like that. It's certainly a unique one in comparison to the other ones that I do listen to. So that's the Vertical podcast that's hosted by JJ Redick of the Los Angeles Clippers. Second one is The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe. So Mike Rowe is you'll know him by his voice. If you're a Foxtel person or you watch the Discovery Channel, I think he's mainly Discovery Channel from off the top of my head, but Mike's probably most well known for the host of Dirty Jobs. He also narrates, I believe, I can't remember those shows. Some of the other reality shows that are on Discovery Channel, like the fishing trawler ones, and I think the logger one, and there's a few other ones anyway. But you'll know his voice straight away. So Mike seems like a really cool and down to earth guy. So he's got these episodes on his podcast, and basically they go for between 6 to 10 minutes long in length, and he puts one out a week. So they're really, really short and sweet. They're really digestible, easy to listen to. It's easy to stay on top of as well. But basically, they're stories that he has a slight twist at the end of it. So he'll paint a picture about somebody and not reveal who that person is until right at the end. That appears to be the common theme with a lot of these stories. But it's a really interesting thing. And obviously, his tagline is, well, that's the way I heard it anyway, just in case he got it slightly wrong. But it's really cool to see, because I think podcasts are known for their longish format, anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours plus in length, where Mike's been able to go in the opposite direction and put out these bite-sized episodes each week that are not terribly distracting and are easy to stay on top of. So that's another idea that I really like, where potentially, you can really put out a lot of content, but in shorter bursts, and obviously had the longevity. No doubt Mike's probably got hundreds of stories there ready to go, and can just put them out weekly with ease. So I think that's a very, very cool thing. It's a very smart way of doing it, and from what I can see, he gets a lot of listeners tuning into that podcast. So it's very, very cool. The next one is an Australian one. It's very new. It's very rough around the edges in some places, but it's a UniV podcast. So this one's really cool. It's got a lot of academia on the as far as guests go, and I can't even remember half the people on there, because I just feel so dumb when I listen to it. But it's one of these podcasts where this has got potential. This has got a lot of potential for people in university, or people like me who never went to university and probably never gave a shit about a lot of that stuff, but only in sort of my later years that I've discovered a bit of an interest for different things, or just hearing, about what people do. So whether it be, I think the last person that I just listened to was, I'm going to get this completely wrong, but something like a forensic scientist, but deals with mainly bugs at crime scenes. So some sort of criminal forensic investigator or whatnot. And it was really interesting just hearing what this person does, and some really interesting things behind the scenes of how important bugs are, and what sort of data they can retain, and for how long they can retain. So, and the discovery of this only just recently, resulting in a lot of cold cases being opened up, and these old unsolved investigations being solved. And so it was really, really interesting. But there's a lot of varying people from the academia world that are interviewed on there, and it is very new. I think off the top of my head, there's probably only several episodes that have been released over the last few months, but it's another one which I think anybody who's got any interest in a variety of areas, especially when it comes to science, will certainly get something out of this. So I'll put some links, as with all these other podcasts, for you guys to check out. Next one, number 4, is Screw-ins. So if you guys have listened to the podcast before, you'll be well acquainted with Screw-ins & Co. Breakfast Show. That will be episode 48 for anybody who is playing along. Screw-ins is one of the funniest podcasts I've ever listened to, and I'm listening to a lot of comedian podcasts. Scruins is one of these ones where it's just, I think he's just created his own thing, and he does it mainly by himself, but does have guests on as well. But it's primarily, he's turned it into this this thing with segments every week, jingles that he's created, and there's just no rules around it whatsoever. And it's really, really cool. And it's probably one of the only ones where I'm finding myself in tears of laughter when I'm listening to his episodes. So that's a really cool one. It's another Australian one, which is awesome to see, and it's great to see more people jumping on board and obviously, you know, taking advantage of this format. Number 5 is another one. I'm cheating a bit here with some easy ones. Podkembler. So if you listen to episode 49, you would have listened to my chat with Kurt from Podkembler, where we did a bit of a swap cast. Podkembler is a great example of just anybody being able to pick up a microphone and create their own podcast. And Kurt's done such a great job building a small community of people and putting out podcasts whenever it feels like it, but, you know, semi-regular. But he's been somebody who's been able to put a bit of perspective back on me when I put a bit of pressure on myself about, you know, getting podcasts out every week or every few days or whatever it might be. And he certainly is sort of, I think, he probably hasn't done it deliberately, but certainly grounded me in a couple of different ways by just more or less saying, you know, you're creating the rules, you're doing it the way that you want to do it. And if you leave it for a week or you leave it for a month or whatever it might be, that's on your terms. It's on no one else's. And Kurt does his thing. He's got a great intro with his wife. That's this common occurrence, and then dives into to whoever he's got on for that week. So it's a really, really cool one to listen to, and I think it's a great example once again of the possibilities that are out there for anybody who wants to pick up a microphone and create their own podcast. You don't have to be, you know, JJ Redick from the Los Angeles Clippers or you know, a famous comedian or anything like that. Anybody can pick up a mic and run their own podcast. So that's a really, really cool one to listen to. Next one is probably the most famous podcast in the world. That's the Joe Rogan Experience. Anyone who is a regular podcast listener, or probably only listens to a couple of podcasts, more than likely one of them will be Joe Rogan's podcast. So I think Joe Rogan's has been one of the longest running podcasts out there, and probably one of the most successful ones. I can't even talk. And was certainly the initial inspiration behind me wanting to do this. He's got such a free-flowing format where he doesn't have your typical interview style conversations. They just shoot the shit for however long, and the episodes typically run between 2 to 3 hours a piece, but he's had a few epic ones, including the one with Sam Harris that went for 4.5 hours. It was just absolutely insane. But it's just, I think for that, it just showed me that there's no rules, and he says it quite a bit in his podcast, which is quite inspiring for me, because it just goes to show that I can ramble on for 20 minutes, I can ramble on for an hour, I can do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter. And, you know, I might lose people and people might decide to turn off. May turn off right now. But, you know, there's no rules behind it. There's no guidebook. There are things that work better than others. But in the end, you do what you want to do. And as long as it's genuine, then that's the main thing. And he's just had so much success with his podcast and gets amazing people on. And he set up his own little podcast studio in LA where people come and visit, and he's just become one of the most sought out people in the podcast world. And it's certainly, you know, not that I want to replicate it completely, but it's certainly something that I want to strive for and go in a direction that may take inspiration from some of the things that he's been able to achieve. And I'm sure the more that I continue to do this and the longer that it runs for, that I'll find more opportunities down the track. But it's a really, really cool podcast to listen to. I don't listen to them all. I usually skip the Fight Companions or anyone who's sort of MMA or some of the other sporting ones, which I'm no doubt will probably be interesting. I'll probably get something out of it. But when I've got so many podcasts to listen to, I become a little bit picky with those episodes. So, but still probably one of the number one podcasts in the world, and for good reason. So if you haven't checked out Joe Rogan, have a look through the feed and look at some of the previous episodes. You'll see a lot of notable people that have been on. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. It's really, really cool. And the other thing is, it just goes to show, I mean, he makes a lot of money from his podcast. You'll hear his ads. He just runs with them, at the start of each episode. He doesn't have pre-recordings like some of the other guys do, but he's very successful just from that podcast alone, but obviously a successful guy in many different areas of his life. So definitely give that a shot if you haven't already. Number 7 is the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. Duncan Trussell I discovered through Joe Rogan, another American comedian from LA. Extremely funny guy. He's got these rants that start off at the beginning of his podcast that go on and on and on, but they're extremely entertaining and quite funny. A lot of his stuff's a bit woo-woo at times, and he goes on a lot of meditation retreats and whatnot, and he's certainly got some interesting outlooks on life, which are they're very interesting to listen to, and very entertaining as well. And he has some great guests on also. He's somebody who's really been able to take it in a different direction, where he has a similar format in the sense that he has people on, has a discussion with them and whatnot, but a lot of it's about his own exploration of himself and trying to work himself out. And he's very open and honest about the challenges that he has along the way, with everything in his life. And it's just the honesty in that's just, it's really, really cool. And it's quite, it's just got a magnetic pull to it. It's really, really cool. And I love the way that he does his advertising as well for his sponsors. He always creates a bit of a comical sort of basis around what he's got to plug and mention at the start of his episodes. So 9 times out of 10, never fast forward through those sections, because they are quite entertaining, and he does mix it up quite a bit. So that's another really, really cool one, especially if you're into comedy. But it's also got quite a lot of serious discussion around it as well. But it's a really good one that I recommend. Number 8 is the Tim Ferriss Show. So if you're not aware of Tim Ferriss, I don't even know the best way to describe him. I call him a bit of a life hack expert. It's probably like the worst way to describe him, but he's written some really popular books called The 4-Hour Workweek, The 4-Hour Chef, The 4-Hour Body, and he has one of the most extensive blog websites on the internet. He talks about anything and everything when it comes to life. He's all about finding the shortest way to be able to achieve something and master something. So using that 80-20 rule, and just a really, really motivating guy in the sense that he's really breaking things down to show that some of these things that we always dismiss to think, well, it's not worth pursuing or having a go at because it's just so far beyond our reach. He grabs a lot of these things and breaks them right down and shows that most of us can achieve many of these great things that we often dismiss ourselves. So it's a very inspiring thing, and he has a lot of great guests on, a lot of people from the tech world, a lot of people from Silicon Valley, a lot of successful writers. He's had actors, basically anyone who is a high performer in any facet of life, and he asks a lot of questions. He has a stock set of questions that he asks at the end of each episode, which are really interesting. And I've been able to pull out so many book recommendations, documentaries, movies, and just little life hacks and all sorts of really cool things that I've been able to get from his podcast. He's one of the guys where he's probably disrupted my life the most in the last 18 months. Reading The 4-Hour Workweek, and listening to his podcasts, and I've still got the 4-Hour Chef and Body that I haven't even touched yet. But he's made me think in a way that I've had to reassess my life, and it's put me into some very vulnerable positions in the sense that I've had to get out of my comfort zone, and I found myself at certain points in time thinking, oh geez, there's no turning back now. I've made this decision. But I can safely say that where I'm sitting at the moment, and and obviously a long way to go with whatever path I'm meant to be going on. I've got no idea. I'm still trying to work that out. But compared to what I was doing 18 months ago to what I'm doing now, I can safely say that everything that I've learned and all the decisions I've made that have sort of been off the back of Tim's podcast or his book have been absolutely beneficial. So that's one of the main recommendations I can if you listen to any of these podcasts and you are interested in a bit of self-development and looking for some ways to improve your life in whatever way, that is definitely a podcast to listen to. It's extremely inspiring and motivating. The only downside to that is don't listen to it on the way to work. It makes things very difficult when you walk in the doors and start doing your normal job. Depending on your perspective, sometimes it can be a good thing because it might get you in the right headspace to make some big decisions. But I would definitely recommend doing it on the way home after work if you're a daily commuter. Number 9, next one up, is Small Business Big Marketing podcast with Tim Reed. Now, this is one where most people probably on the surface would not have a great deal of interest in, and I'm just stereotyping there. But this is an extremely good podcast if you are looking to sell anything. And when I say sell anything, I don't mean you own your own business, you have a product or a service or anything like that. Even if you're selling an idea to somebody, you want to convince somebody of something. You want to be able to articulate something that tugs at the heartstrings of other people or makes them pay attention to what you're doing, especially when we're in a world now where we've never had as many distractions as we do now. It's harder than ever in some ways, depending on how you look at it, to really stand out amongst everybody else, because everybody's screaming and yelling out and waving things in front of you. It's almost like we had election day yesterday, and going to the polls and walking, and I'm sure this happens in many countries, but walking to where you vote, and a number of people throwing flyers at you and trying to convince you to vote for a particular party. And it's kind of like that in the digital world, where you turn on social media or your emails or even on TV and radio, everything. There's always somebody trying to grab your attention. Even when you drive, the signs that you see, stickers on the backs of cars and trucks, advertising's everywhere, and people are trying to convince you to turn your head in a particular direction and hopefully, as a result, pull your wallet out or your credit card. But I think if you're even just trying to communicate better with other people, you want to connect better with other people, you want people to pay a little bit more attention to who you are, what you do, what you love doing, the things that matter the most to you. This is a really, really cool podcast. It is focused on people that run small businesses, but for me, I've been able to pull so much out of this just in my everyday life, in the way that I converse with people, the ideas that I give to my friends who are trying to do great things, pushing a band or music or a business. I've been able to pull a lot of ideas that I've been able to support other people, and also convey ideas in a general sense. It's all about connecting with other people, and marketing is just it's an extremely powerful tool that I think sometimes we neglect to really focus on, because we're always thinking that it's got something to do with selling a product or service, when it's really so much more than that. It is an Australian podcast. Tim Reed, the host, is pretty ochre and pretty comical. He's really, really good. And I think his voice and the way that he approaches it is very digestible. It can be quite comical at times. It's very easy to listen to. And there are so many takeaways. He really breaks it down well. He's got a great format. And I definitely encourage you guys to just listen to one of them. The intro song is quite irritating, but you'll find that if you listen to it more than once, it'll get stuck in your head. It's just one of those things that you just can't get rid of, and it's rumbling around in my cranium right now. So I'll try and move on, but definitely listen to that. It's a fantastic podcast. I probably haven't given it enough justice, but give that one a shot. There's a lot of great things. I know there's a few people out there that, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent already, who are photographers and are looking to try and get a little bit more notice with their photography. This is another example of a great resource where you guys can get some further guidance of how to break out amongst the large sea of other people trying to do the same thing. But this is This is for anyone and everyone who is interested in trying to communicate better with other people. So definitely give that one a shot. So that was called Small Business, Big Marketing Podcast with Tim Reed. Number 10, the last one in my top 10, or my 10 podcasts that I'm listening to at the moment. I'll have to work out a way to write this on my website so I can get lots of clickbait, results on my page. So I'll make it a really sort of most important podcasts of your life, or 10 most important podcasts of 2016. I don't know. I'll make something up anyway. So the last one in my list, in my 10, is WTF with Mark Maron. Now, this is probably a really obvious one for people that do listen to podcasts. It does pop up quite a bit. To be honest, it's not a podcast that I listen to religiously. I don't listen to it very regularly. I may find that I only listen to one a month, or maybe two a month, out of the 8 that he puts out each month. So he usually does one on the Monday and the Thursday of each week. But mainly, most of his guests are sort of high-end celebrities. They're actors and actresses. They're comedians. They're legendary musicians, and he's even had the President of the United States, Barack Obama. So he's probably one of the more famous podcasters out there, especially after having the President of the US come to his garage and appear on his podcast. I think that sort of shot him into the stratosphere of podcast royalty. But it's a really cool podcast. It's similar to Duncan Trussell's one, because he's very open and honest with the way that he does his intros. He sometimes probably it's more it's probably has more of a negative impact for him than anything else, but I think it's just the genuine approach that he does take, and he's very, very raw with what he talks about and the way that he feels about things, and I think that connects with a lot of people and helps with his success. On top of that, obviously, he's interviewing some of the most famous people in the world as well. And look, to his credit, I'm not really normally interested in what an A-grade celebrity's got to say. It's just not. I'm not into celebrity gossip. I'm not into, it's just none of that stuff really fascinates me. But there are some particular people that I would really like to hear a bit about. And Mark Maron has just got a really sort of, I was going to say pushy way, but he doesn't really. It's a very sort of direct way of talking to them. It's not so much questions, but I think he tends to sort of do the "this is your life" approach, where he'll sort of go from day dot, childhood, and work their way up and how they got into the things that they're doing now and whatnot. So it's a similar sort of format and approach that he takes on each one, but it is quite interesting. And sometimes you do discover some really interesting insights into people. And I think his skill that I think he has is that he's able to get people to talk on a very candid level. And I think that's just part of the wonders of the podcast format as well, is that you're not worried about, a radio DJ and segments and time and sponsors and advertising and popping up left, right, and center. You can dictate how long you want to chat for. So I think because of that, he's been able to get people to open up a lot more and not be so reserved in their answers as you normally see when someone's promoting a movie or a product or whatever it might be. So I definitely would recommend listening to the one with the president. I think that's probably a great indication of the possibilities of what podcasts can do to people with conversation. It's a great insight, and even the follow-up podcast episode after that, where they talk about how it all came together, is really, really interesting. But he's had some amazing people on there. I just recently listened to one with Neil Young. I'm not even a Neil Young fan, but that was really cool. He's had Keith Richards on. He's had I can't remember half the people on there now. So he's had a lot of great people on there, and some people that have tragically passed on as well. He's got a really, really good one with Robin Williams that's well worth listening to as well. So it's a very famous podcast. A lot of you guys will probably know it. It's not one that, as I said, that I regularly listen to, but it's one that I have in my feed that I check weekly to see who it is, and then make a decision as to whether I want to download and listen to it. So that's my 10. So as I said before, they're in no particular order. They were pretty much in the order that show up in my Apple iTunes podcast app, and they're not necessarily the best ones out there, but they are certainly ones that are done in different ways and different formats, the different purposes that they have behind them, but they all run on their own terms. There's no strict rules behind them. They've done it in a way that they want to do themselves. And I think for me, doing this episode, and I think I'll do another one, I don't know, 6 to 12 months time, whatever it might be, and just do another 10, because I'm sure that my list of podcasts will change down the track, because there's so many out there. It's overwhelming to understand how many podcasts are out there. I should have looked it up before I press record, because it's it's still relatively new in Australia and in a lot of areas of the world, but I mean, the US alone, there is just countless numbers of podcasts, and that should not be a deterrent to anyone to not dive in. I think the more people out there that are doing it, the better. There's always people that want to listen, and regardless of whether you have a small audience or a big audience, it's just such a rewarding thing to do, and you can get so much out of it. It's just really, really cool. At the very least, you'll have a documentation of your thoughts and the things that you love or the things that interest you that will be out there forever for people to listen to, whether it be right here, right now, or whether it be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time, however long the internet exists for. Now, before we go, I might just make a few quick special mentions for other podcast episodes, because I won't spend too much time explaining these, but I just wanted to make these mentions because I know there'll be a few people that will probably mention these anyway, and there are some people that are doing great things. So one of them's Kia Solomon, guys from Melbourne that have been doing a podcast for a little while now. Theirs is really cool. They mainly interview guys in the arts, mainly musicians, and people that are in the Melbourne area. But it's really, really cool, and it's certainly, for me, a motivating one, knowing that there's more people in Australia that are doing podcasts, especially in the music realm. It's really cool. The other one is the Claim the Throne podcast, or Bodcast. That's really cool as well. Some great insights behind the scenes of how that band Claim the Throne from Perth run. I haven't listened to it for a while, actually, to be honest, but those guys have been doing it for a while now, and certainly another one that gave me a little bit of a push to finally get off my ass and do my own podcast. Very quickly, Damn Interesting is one from the Damn Interesting website. You can have a listen to their podcast. They only put one every few months, but they are really cool. As the title says, they are damn interesting. So definitely give that a shot. Variety of topics and stories. There's no real theme there apart from the stories being a little bit quirky and interesting. So give that a shot. The other two, I'll just do two more because I can't help myself. Dan Cullen's Hardcore History. It's probably another one of the more popular podcasts out there in the podcast world. These podcasts are epic. They average on about 4 hours an episode, and depending on the story that is being depicted, they can be several part series. So one that I recommend, and you're going to have to really dedicate yourself to this one, is Blueprint for Armageddon, which is all around World War One, and I think off the top of my head, there's 6 or 7 parts to it, and they all average about 3 to 4 hours each. They are ridiculously long and epic, but they are amazing. Dan Carlin does it all himself. He narrates it. He has a few special effects here and there, but his storytelling techniques is just out of this world. And I had a hard time being convinced of this when someone else was telling me how good it was, because I thought, how could I listen to the one guy talk for 3 or 4 hours at a time? But he's just incredible, absolutely incredible. So I think if you just went back to Blueprint for Armageddon, the first one, and have a listen to that, it's amazing. But he's got ones on the Mongols, Genghis Khan. There's a few others. He's been doing it for a while now. He has big lapses between his episodes because he really dedicates a lot of time putting these episodes together, a lot of research, a lot of planning and prepping to get the episodes together. But when they come out, geez, they're absolutely insane. And if anything, I probably should have had that in my 10 list now, looking back now in hindsight. But But yeah, a really cool cool podcast. And last one, I'm so sorry, guys, I'll let you go soon. Henry and Heidi. Now, this is one that no longer exists or hasn't had an update since, I believe, 12 months ago. But it's Henry Rollins, who was famous from Black Flag, Rollins Band, his own spoken word stuff, etc. And his assistant Heidi, the two of them did I don't even know how many episodes, maybe 16 or 17 episodes. It wasn't a great deal. And it was more of a case that Heidi would pick out some classic stories from Henry's years, and Henry would spend the time telling these stories. And I've seen Henry Rollins a few times, his stand-up, spoken word, and they are incredible. He's one of those awe-inspiring individuals that really just opens your mind up to different ways of living and perspectives, and being an open mind and being less judgmental of others, and being a kinder human. He's just an incredible guy. But when you listen to these stories on the podcast, and a lot of them I don't think he's told on his previous tours, it's a different dynamic altogether, because he is telling everybody via the podcast, but he's more or less sitting there with Heidi, his assistant, and just talking. And it's fantastic. And I sit there, I've actually subscribed to the podcast in hope that one day I'm going to turn the app on and see a new episode pop up there. So hopefully they'll kick it back into gear again sometime down the track. But one note of that one, which is really cool to make note of, and something that I thought about the other day, was that's a podcast that sits there in the podcast world, floating around in space, and hasn't been touched in 12 months. But I found it about 2 months ago, and I went back and listened to them all, right from the start to the most recent one. But they hadn't touched it in 12 months. And that just shows me that, what I do and what other people do with the podcasts, and it's like music. You record something, you put something out there, and then that's it. It goes and it floats off into space, and it's there to be accessed by people now, in a few weeks, a few months' time, a few years' time, and forever people discovering these great things out there. And the more content that's getting produced, the more out there that we can find. So that's pretty exciting, and I guess it gives me a bit of peace of mind with this podcast, that I don't need to stress myself out by trying to maintain a certain momentum. And if I need to take a break for whatever reason, that I can do so. I probably wouldn't. But you never know. And it's just great to see that even though you might stop for a short period of time or a long period of time, people can still discover what you're doing. So that's it's a great thing to see, and another one to recommend to check out. But that's about it. I won't keep rambling on. I've got another 20-odd podcasts that I could make a mention of now. But as I said, maybe in another 6 to 12 months' time, I'll do another 10 that you guys can have a check out and listen to, and we'll go from there. But before I wrap up, very quickly, you can cue that music, Damien, so we can get the hell out of here. But rate and review on iTunes. It's the best way of supporting the podcast. Use the Amazon portal from andysocial.net. And share those YouTube links around as well. So you can search for me on all social media platforms, Andy Dowling, or you can find me through the band lord.net.au. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll speak soon. Bye-bye.